Hello, hello, and welcome to the sixth episode of Elevative Shots. I'm pretty excited because, sort of like half of the 12th package of the year, recording and filming these episodes. And today, this episode, is close to my heart. We're gonna be talking about all things comms, which is one of my passions and one of my guests' passions. And I'm going to introduce Mel Gibbons. How are you today, Mel?
I'm good. I'm good, Mariana. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for accepting the invite to be here. Um, Mel is a passionate communications professional and with over 20 years of experience across the public, government, non-for-profit, and private sectors in Australia and the UK. She now leads Elm Communications, providing expert advice in communications and engagement. Before launching her consultancy in 2018, she spent over a decade in the Commonwealth government, specializing in climate change policy and regulation. Mel has dedicated um, her career to elevate the comms profession. Yay! And helping practitioners showcase the value of communications. Outside of work, Mel enjoys cooking vegetarian meals from her garden. That's hard work, but great. Relaxing with a good book. You're gonna tell us what you're reading if you're reading something
Yeah.
now, Mel, and keeping up with her energetic Lavra doodle that might appear or not in our video today, Mel. Sometimes I remember seeing, yeah,
Yeah, he breaks in every now and then. So you
good,
might see him pop in behind me.
excellent. Um, and fun fact, I'm so envious in a good way, but Mel have traveled to 75 countries and she's adding another one in May. That's
Yes.
absolutely
Cyprus.
awesome. Cyprus. Oh, wow, incredible. Let me just get this. Well, Mel, thank you again for being here. What is a book? Are you reading a book at the moment?
Yes, I'm reading. So I loved the Thursday Motor Club series by Richard Osman. And so I'm just reading his new book at the moment, but I've only just started it. So I can't give a review just yet.
Okay, okay, well,
Yeah.
that's good.
I'll come back. I'll come back and report
You'll
in.
come back, yes. Okay. The role of communication in change. That is, change. It's I was just facilitating last week and people said, like the participants were reflecting on how can we start seeing change as a good thing, because there's no way we can change it. It's happening every day, all the time. So how can we see it from a positive way? So many organizations struggle with the resistance to change. So, in your experience, Mel, how can leaders leverage that communication to create clarity, build trust, and drive successful change initiatives?
So I think first I would say, I mean, we work mostly with government departments, and particularly in government, change is inevitable. Like it is coming, whether you want it or not. It's probably also one of the most change resistant sectors. A lot of people really fear change, but actually it's happening all around them all the time. And I think change gets a really bad name, particularly in government, because of how it's managed and how it's communicated. But, really, I guess what I want to emphasize is the way that you can create clarity and build trust and drive successful change is by partnering with comms people. And that's where I've always found the most effective change programs is where you have, an amazing change manager, but they've partnered with the comms team that really understands how change can work and be effective in their organizations. And, I think really the role of communications can't be overemphasized when overcoming resistance to change, when overcoming change fatigue. People are tired of change. It's happening around them all the time. And so it's about, helping to really clarify the why this is happening, how it fits into other change programs or other changes that they're facing, and really, appreciating that uncertainty and fatigue in an organization because regardless of whether it's change that's actually happening or change that you're hearing about that might come about, particularly as we lead into the election. I think, appreciating that and acknowledging that and knowing that that's something that you're going to face is really kind of clear key to creating that clarity and building that trust is just appreciating that that is a thing. Um, I think the other thing I would say is it's really back to those fundamentals of engagement, being really clear on where staff can be involved and have influence and where they can't. Quite often change is imposed upon us and you don't get a say in what happens. So just be honest about that rather than trying to hide behind it or hide behind, fake engagement where you're kind of, taking up staff time, but actually, they can normally call that out and see it now because they've been faced with it so often. The only other thing I would say in this space is quite, what we see a lot of is people really trying to hide behind what they know. So, we don't know that yet, so we can't talk about it.
Mm.
And actually, they're normally the questions that staff have is the stuff that you don't have all the answers for. So being really open and transparent and being willing to go, I don't know, but that's a really great question. Let's go find out for you. Or we don't know that yet, but we are going to know it in 3 weeks' time, 4 weeks' time when we finish that piece of work. So I think just not being scared of being transparent and open really helps to build that trust and drive more successful change programs.
Yeah, I think you mentioned the key word, especially when we're not transparent or we avoid telling the information with honesty, fear.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I love the invitation of overcome the fear because, as you said, the consequences are worse.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
I
We
was
quite often go, what's the worst that could happen if you tell them you don't know?
Yeah, and look, I think they really appreciate when you're honest, even if the truth is something that they don't want to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what builds the trust is, by being honest and being open about the fact that, this is what's actually happening and you can't influence it. The decision's been made, but here's what we do know and here's what we can change. And this is where we do want your input. Being really open about some of those things actually helps to build trust rather than undermine it.
And open that a dialogue, that two-way conversation, even though you cannot change what's going on in this decision, let's say, but at least I'm telling you and I'm opening a conversation to listen to you, which is what
Yeah.
people want at the end of the day.
Yeah. We spend a lot of time in these, situations going, well, what's the worst that could happen? Is that worse than staff actually knowing about that? Is if we told them and we don't have all the answers or we think they probably won't like it, is that worse than the outcome when they find out we've been lying?
Exactly. Yes, asking that powerful question of,
Yeah.
is that worse, or it's gonna be better at the end of the implementation, I think.
Yes,
I think
absolutely.
that's very linked to the authenticity as a leader. And so in part of in your work, you emphasize that authenticity and human connections in communication is key. So if that's the case, how can leaders balance being authentic while also ensuring their messaging, very similar to what we're talking about, is strategic and aligns with the business objectives during this time of transformation?
I think, what I find interesting and why I really call this out when we're doing communications is because this was not the case 10, 15 years ago. We were training people or training executive in how to follow key messages exactly as they were
Mm,
provided to them. You were to keep on message and on, aligned to exactly what was written in front of you. And that is absolutely not the case anymore. And I think, society has changed, our introduction to social media and the way that the media interacts with us really has changed how we see the world and how much we trust people and we trust leaders and we trust the media and we trust government. And so I think, those people that seem more approachable and are more open and you can tell that they are very genuine, we are
mm.
more likely to trust when they talk to us. And so, it's no longer the case that employees expect you to be this talking head that's just following a script. And I think what, is really important is that balance between balancing authenticity, but having a consistent strategic message that you're aiming towards.
Mm.
And, while we used to tell people to, practice the key messages and follow what they were saying, now it's much more around that tailoring it to your own personality and being able to, while sticking to the message and sticking to the tone that we're looking for, it is about, sharing personal experiences or sharing what you're feeling or thinking about something while also delivering the information that staff need. And I think by showing a little bit of that vulnerability, it also shows people that you are a human and that it's okay to either be feeling what they're feeling or feel resistant to the change. And I think those leaders that are able to do that and be a bit more authentic and say, yeah, this change is pretty confronting for me too. This is, a story of when I've faced change before and what happened, but let me tell you about what's happening here. So wherever you can kind of weave in those personal stories and those personal experiences, while maintaining, the story that you're looking to tell or the narrative about the change, the more genuine you come across and the more people are going to be willing to trust you.
That's really, yeah, spot on because yeah, those times where I advise, when I was in the corporate world, this is the manual of key messages that you have to learn and then
Yes,
present to your audience or used all the time. And look, somehow that also helps for consistency, right?
absolutely.
But it's how you combine and integrate those key ideas with your own self and
Yes.
presenting yourself as a human.
Yeah. And I think, that took me a long time to realize, in my job just to be more me and to be more authentic about who I am and what I kind of, you know, where I work. I work at home with my dogs breaking in, and that's just part of, my life and how I roll. It doesn't make me less professional or less good at my job or less experienced in what I can deliver, but it is just who I am. And so I think, having that authenticity and being who you are is just, um, it's really come to the forefront in the last couple of years around, leadership and being a great leader.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think there's always this fear, again, going back to fear of showing who you are.
Mhm.
And especially when you're in a leadership role, are you a different person at work and at home? That's always an interesting conversation, right? And
Yeah.
and some people, yeah, they're different. They think they're different in the two different settings, right? So it's how you find that balance in being authentic everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. So, internal comms. My whole experience, or big part of my experience was in internal comms, and you have worked with organizations to uplift their internal comms. So, what are some common pitfalls businesses and organizations face in internal messaging? It might be similar to what we've been talking, right? Everything is linked. And how can leaders create a culture where communication becomes a strategic asset rather than an afterthought? So, how can we make sure that leaders think about the comms and internal comms first instead of being reactive?
I mean, I think, some of the common issues that we sort of see in this space are exactly what, you've been saying is, what we've been talking about before is around those, having really vague or ambiguous messaging that leaves everybody confused, and, using jargon or technical language, as the kind of lead in your, project. Like I remember having really long conversations about SOE upgrades and having no idea what anyone was talking about for several meetings before I was like, oh, you're going to update my computer. Great. That we can tell people. But for me, it is very much about um, engaging your comms team early. The internal comms team is absolutely the connection across the business. So
Yeah.
they are hearing everything, they're seeing everything, they know staff and executive probably better than a whole lot of other people. So actually, engaging that team early in the project rather than late, because that's quite often the pitfall. When you bring them in at the last minute, that's where, you're not going to get as great an outcome. But I think also, making sure that you're not just using them as a one-way broadcast of information. Your computer's going to be updated on Monday, we're done. Just put that newsletter article out, put that internet story up. But actually asking them for advice and talking to them about how you can be engaging and communicating with staff in a really effective and strategic way. Because again, quite often, internal comms is seen as a channel rather than a strategic partner particularly in change.
Mm,
And that's what we hear a lot when we go in to do reviews of comms teams is, they hate being engaged late in the project because they've got some really good ideas about how you could do this in a much more creative and interesting way. And they know how their channels work and they're very, connected into a lot of the different communities and groups within the organization. So they can normally help you actually get into some of those power people to get your message there in a different way. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think it's, about aligning those messages, and you can do that through talking to your comms team who knows what else is happening across the organization and making it a more of a story rather than just a one-off change program or a one-off project that's sort of coming out. They can actually, create that connection in.
yeah. No. And I think the key word here is potentially, the co-creation. It's not the corporate
Yes,
announcement that imagined in your head. It's how can we all co-create? And then
yes,
you bring the diversity of perspectives to the table because
absolutely.
naturally we are just biased or we have assumptions. But if we have a diversity of voices, you might think differently than me, and maybe we can come to a common ground and we might complement perspective, right? So I think the co-creation piece, and I think the other one that we have been covering through our conversation today is making those stories human.
Yes.
Um, from past experiences. Oh, I've seen so many dehumanization, I'll say it in the comms, just because you
Yes.
don't involve your comms teams and then you don't get to, I think information with emotions is likely to be retained. And if we
Yes.
don't have that, it's just sending something, as you said, right?
Yeah. And you would be surprised how effective, a comms team or a, internal comms advisor can be if you bring them in early. So even looking at, your timeline, they might go to you, oh, that's really interesting, but actually that's a public holiday and that's school holidays and we've got a big event on here. So actually cutting through won't be effective during this period. Have you thought about delaying by a week because you'll actually get a better outcome? And all of a sudden, it's not even comms advice, it's actually just helping you get a better outcome for your project. But because they have this wealth of kind of knowledge about what's impacting staff, they can actually put themselves into that position and go, hang on a second, we can get a better story here or a better outcome. And, getting them involved early means they can put, the staff at the center of some of that communications, which is always going to be the better way to work.
Mm, no, definitely, definitely. Well, Mel, I think so many great things and insights out of this conversation. I call it shots because I want them to be, three questions, three insights. We get more than that throughout the conversation, but it goes so quickly. And but I want just to give the audience a little bit of the taste of this. And then if they want to know more, Mel is there for you, very active on LinkedIn. I will add the LinkedIn, the website, everything on the YouTube channel and LinkedIn. And reach out, ask questions, suggestions, debate. I always ask people, challenge my ideas. Otherwise, how do we grow? How do we learn?
Absolutely. Yeah, and we love just having a chat. Like we are happy to just like sit and talk about some internal comms challenges because we love it and we love doing that. And we love just talking to people about some of the challenges they're facing internally and with some of their change programs because we love what we do. So it's just, and it's fun.
It is fun. It is, and there's a lot of passion here. So that's something that is kind of unique, right? So we need more passion, especially in the
Yeah,
comms space.
absolutely.
Well, Mel, thank you so much for being here with me today. Would you like to add something else before we go?
No, I mean, I think the key thing is what we started talking about, right? The reason why we are passionate about communications is because we believe that we can demonstrate a whole lot of value in our profession if you just let us in early. And so I think, communications can help internally and externally, telling your story, helping to change behavior, helping to build awareness. But, it's really about valuing that professional communications advice that you have internally. So if I can leave everyone with one message, it is that it's about, making sure that you utilize that expertise that you have available to you.
And how you bring everyone on board of that change from the beginning so they can
Yeah.
embrace it instead of resisting and rejecting the change. Thank
Absolutely.
you, Mel, again for your time. Thank you, everyone, for watching. If you have any comments, suggestions, recommendations, this space is yours. And I hope, or I will see you in the next episode very soon of another episode, another elevative shot for you. Thank you, Mel. See you, everyone. Bye-bye.